Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Truth or Trend. Today, we are going to talk even more about headaches and the long-term consequences of not taking the message from the headaches. That's a really big message that I think we are finding we need to repeat over and over to make sure that we're encouraging and giving everybody all the options that they really deserve to be able to get themselves to be as healthy as possible. So if you've never listened to us before, I'm Dustin Strong. I'm a holistic nutritionist. This is Dr. Vrzal, the author of The Headache Advantage. And together, we try to create a community here online where we can all talk about things and fill in each other's blind spots and help each other become the best versions of ourselves possible. And today,
on a mission.
It's the mission. That's right. That's right.
On a mission.
No doubt about it. So yeah, today we want to start with a couple of stories, and I'm going to pass it off because Dr. Vrzal, if you're hearing this, it's going to be a week after his last thyroid summit talk on thyroid headaches specifically, which is very interesting. And that is going to be available for, we'll put the links below for you can get deeper into that. But we're going to discuss a little bit of that. But I was just telling him a story about somebody who came in because they had migraines. I forgot to tell you, Dr. V, since 2012, her doctor has had her on this medication.
And since 2012.
Since 2012, 3 times a day, she was taking this medication. And, here's the reason why. I want to point out why I'm concerned about this is let's go down to the side effects on this. These are common: blurred vision, right? Clumsiness, unsteadiness, confusion, all of these things these are really rugged side effects. And
neurologic.
What's that?
A bunch of neurologic symptoms. That's
a lot of neurologic symptoms. And the fact that she's just been put on this and told she has to take it every day. And that's what blew my mind is to think is we talk about having to get nutrition in every day, but somebody's taking a medication every day, 3 times a day, no problem.
But Dustin, that's preventative medicine, right?
Yikes. Yeah. Prevention of living your whole life, right? It's what it's more like. Now, this lady, we've got some work to do, right? Obviously. And thankfully was able to give her a copy of your book, Dr. V, The Headache Advantage, so she can read on it herself. It become her idea and start to realize that there's a lot more we can do. Now, we have her on a protocol that is gonna improve her life in many ways, and very hopefully get her to a point where she realizes that this medication is no longer necessary. And that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do to help people out with that, because she is experiencing a lot of side effects. But you brought up something very interesting that I want to mention is if anybody you know out there who's taking this medication, it's really important that we also let people know that these medications deplete certain nutrients, right? And there's 3 big ones that this one specifically depletes. And number 1 is biotin, right? So many people out there trying to take a bad form of biotin and make sure that you're getting that from a synthetic. That is something that you're going to want to focus on from a whole food standpoint. The thing that I always reach for with biotin is going to be the B vitality with CoQ10 from Standard Process. So that's one that I'm going to think about for that. But vitamin D and folate all depleted when taking this with this medication. And so always know that there isn't just side effects. And who knows, some of these side effects could be the result of depletion of those nutrients as well. So
for sure.
Yeah, we always want to talk about how we can give people resolution, because man, 14 years now, she's been on this medication 3 times a day. And obviously she keeps coming up with all these other things that she is struggling with. And very likely it's just the result of the side effects of this. And we never got to the cause early. So hopefully next time I talk to you, I'll have a much better story to share about her.
Bring it. Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect segue into what we're about to talk about too, is the folate deficiency that 12 years of Topomax, or what is that, 12, 15, 16 years?
14 years,
14 years of Topomax, and that folate deficiency just opens the door for underfunctioning methylation. That is really the gist of what we're about to talk about, and the potentially lethal consequences of such a decision.
Right. And I think that, again, so the thing that we're trying to really repeat over and over and over again is just because something is, maybe that's working for, it's keeping the migraines at bay, but that should be a short-term solution until we figure out what's the thing below that's missing, because what are the negative consequences are going to be what? The worst case scenario.
Death.
Right. After a few years
death
of
by cancer.
Right. Exactly. And then depletion of all of your resources, emotional, financial, and all of that because of something that was just totally ignored and skipped over. And that's what we want to talk about today, is making sure that as soon as you get a signal from the body, whether it's a thyroid headache or any type of anything that you're using medication, we have to identify what are the things that have been missing that have created that signal, and what is that medication depleted, so we can make sure that that doesn't create another problem, right? Overall. Take it away, Dr.
Sure.
This, I want to hear what you have ready for us today, because this is really important for everyone to hear when it comes, because there's so many people with thyroid medication, right? For years, it's been the number one sold medication out there.
Perfect point. Exactly. And that's yeah, even over cholesterol. I mean, that just baffles me, right? Even over cholesterol and so on. But it's an easy sale, right? Hey, you're gonna stop being so weepy. You're gonna have hair. You're gonna lose weight. Your mood's gonna be better. Okay, take this little pill.
Yeah,
sure. Bring it on. It's an easy sale. And wouldn't you know, hypothyroidism is one of the triggers of high cholesterol. So then, now they are on a cholesterol medication for this thyroid concern, and around the symphony goes that, it's not such a beautiful symphony in that case.
No, it's not at all.
It's an ugly situation. So yeah, the thyroid gets feedback from most of the other glands and organs. Come on, little computer.
I hope if you're watching, you're seeing the thyroid symphony. There we go.
Yeah,
here we go.
So just touch on this a little bit. Harrower's legendary chart from many years ago, outlines the fact that it gets feedback from the pituitary, from the male and female hormones, from the adrenals. Under chronic stress, it deactivates the thyroid hormone, so then energy goes down, and that would be the swelling of the left side of the thyroid. And incidentally, the left side tends to be more reactive to reverse T3 problems, and then liver and so on. So ultimately, what we're going to get into today is the more potentially, unfortunately, lethal consequences of inactivity, of not taking this to heart, not understanding. This chart, as you can see, I put together in 2016. I think it was 2014, actually, about the same time the gal started her Topamax, that I was, working on this seminar, putting notes together, and, really deep diving into I teach a 12-hour thyroid seminar. So as I was digging into all those mechanisms, just to quickly try to simplify this chart for people, the gonads give feedback to the pituitary. Pituitary is kind of the air traffic control for all these hormonal situations. It makes thyroid stimulating hormone, tells the thyroid what to do. And then that thyroid hormone, the thyroid produces T4, which in the liver glucuronidation pathway predominantly converts to T3. Toxic metals, insulin, toxic metals and insulin are a couple of the big heavy hitters that can inhibit that conversion of T3. There's the very, very cliff note version, but to help make this hopefully chart look a little less daunting for people. So as I was putting this,
I think the point is, when you're looking at this, to just focus on the thyroid, to just put T4, synthetic T4 into a thyroid case, ignores all the rest of the body, and all the rest of the body is impacted by the thyroid indirectly or directly through this chart. So this is why it's just it's so reductionistic, to use, Dr. Gaeta's term always, to only say, oh yeah, let's just hit that thyroid with another hormone that you have to work on. It's just, you're missing out on massive opportunities of healing when that's the approach that you go to with the thyroid. So
that's the bang in the head. It's like, come on, people.
Well, and here's what we have to overcome, is the fact that it's been normalized. It's been normalized for decades. That, you're hypothyroid, we just need to give you this hypothyroid medication, as opposed to, well, why are you hypothyroid, right? It's not because why can't your body make that hormone? Asking these deeper questions and understanding that just doing that is going to lead to so many other cases. When I start to show people the contraindications of taking that medication, their minds are blown, right? I mean, because adrenal insufficiency is contraindicated with that medication. Well, of course, let's look at it. And the warnings on it, the black box warnings that people aren't talking about. So there's such a better way. And hopefully, Dr. V, we can give people today some actionable things that they can do to move forward and get this, to make this antiquated. Let's put this behind us. Let's move forward and evolve. right?
Right. And so along to further what you're saying, I mean, always be asking why, right?
Right, right,
Why is D low? Why is TSH low? And along those lines, treat the person, not the labs, right?
right.
It's not lab numbers that we're trying to help. We're trying to help a person thrive and excel in this lovely thing called life. So
Yep.
back in 2014, 2016, as I was putting on well, anyway, let's talk about this is one of the old school charts of, typical signs, symptoms of underfunctioning thyroid. We've got the increased weight because metabolism slows down, right? Decrease in appetite, again, metabolism slows down. Fatigue is one of the most common reasons a person seeks medical help.
Mm.
Ringing in the ears because of the
Whoa,
cortisol.
ringing in the ears. What are you talking about? You talking about tinnitus there?
Look
I
at
feel like we're gonna have to
that.
do a whole episode on tinnitus actually coming up.
Nice
Well, I
prompt.
want to pause us there because it's interesting, and I love this. This is a part of the community that we have here. We had a doctor write in and saying that they had somebody who had horrible tinnitus. They started chewing nicotine gum, and it went away like immediately.
Right.
Right. So helping understand why and what could be going on with that is one of the things that we try to do. And if you go back to that episode, we answered in the comments on that, but we will get into that deeper. But interesting that ringing in the ears could be also associated to hypothyroid, but it's not just because it's a lack of T4 is what I'm trying to say, right? Taking T4 isn't going to correct why there's ringing in the ears. Continues.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and along those lines, I was just looking at a post by a doctor that was talking, was talking about that smokers had the least symptoms from COVID because of
Yep.
the activation of the nicotinamide receptors, right, all day long that they were doing. So hey, maybe there's a benefit to smoking, huh? Is that what that is? Is that what that
We're
means?
not going to say that. Every time I start talking about it, well, there's
I
three
know.
things that I always talk about when it comes to tobacco, and it's definitely nicotine, but don't forget about lithium being highest source in there, but
Oh, that's
also
right.
osmotin. Osmotin is something that people aren't talking enough about, and those are highly sourced in tobacco. So I'm not again, to be clear, we're not advocating tobacco use here. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
But learn from it. Learn from it if there's an association. What is it that's potentially helping those individuals? Like you said, low COVID. Same thing with Parkinson's. There's this paradox, right? People who smoke have a 77% less likely what is it called? Genesis of Parkinson's. That's what I'm trying to think. This is what
Yeah.
he talks about in the promise of lithium. He's talking about that. He's thinking it's lithium, but
Yeah.
there's so much more that we can look at from that. I'm sorry, I keep
Right.
throwing you off.
Nah,
Here.
that's the way we
But
roll. As long as one of these pearls changes somebody's life, that's what we're all about, right?
right. But the pearl isn't to start smoking, everybody. That's not the pearl is to learn. Maybe you don't have enough. Maybe you need to engage your
Right.
nicotine receptors with plants or other
Well,
foods that have.
yeah. And unfortunately, most of those nicotine sources have toxic metals, and that's the shortfall.
That's right.
It brings up its own, constellation of problems
Right.
that we'll be talking about a little bit today. So dry skin, these are all pretty prominent symptoms of hypothyroid. Constipation, I mean, again, we're regulating metabolism, so people don't poop as properly, and mental sluggishness, the weepiness, the mental processing really I call the thyroid the processing chip, if you will. So we give them a thyroid supplement, they're going to have a processor upgrade. And I've seen people that their thyroid is very off that just can't get those words out. So anyway, the coarse hair and hair loss, of course, headaches, especially wearing off during the day. Those headaches are going to be suboccipital, like this purple headache here. I added a little translucent thyroid to the back of that.
Nice.
I'm trying to up my game a little, huh? So then we got the slow pulse, frequency of urination, impaired hearing, again, tinnitus kind of concerns, and then reduced initiative. So, I mean, the thyroid is no wonder it's the biggest, most common selling medication because there's just this constellation of symptoms from it are profound and affect the daily life. And so we've got morning headaches that wear off. These are hypothyroid symptoms. Cramps while at rest, right? While at rest, that means high homocysteine. That means in this case is going to indicate that methylation is not working very well or not working properly because homocysteine needs to get broken down in sulfation, both the sulfation pathway and the methylation pathway. When homocysteine is high, we're going to have those red dots. I think we've talked about that a few
So let's back that
podcasts
up a little bit.
ago.
Let's back that up a little bit. So you're saying that one of the things that we need to remind people of if they have high homocysteine is there may not have adequate sulfation. And you said, what was the other pathway? Methylation, right?
Methylation. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So go ahead.
well, that's what we're going to dive in today, but carry
Okay.
on, go.
Here it is. Yeah. So this is important. So because I'm seeing a lot of people doing the function health labs and a lot of people coming back with high homocysteine. Now there's a lot of thoughts and different things that we can talk about that. And I have different things that I try to identify with those individuals specifically. But I do think it's a really important reminder that we also look at is sulfation and methylation specifically being facilitated. So continue.
100%. Yeah, no, that's perfect segue. And that's really where we're going today. The main nutrient when homocysteine is high, the main nutrient to break it down is B6, wouldn't you
There
know?
it is.
So, we
B6.
should have this, right, have this, and that's why you don't see it in, it's well known in the cardiovascular world that homocysteine is a direct indicator of cardiovascular risk and damage. And so the higher, you were talking about the function health labs or any labs, when they test homocysteine, the higher it is, the higher the risk for stroke or heart attack, and the more likely it is to be fatal. I mean, it is a direct indicator. Whereas cholesterol is like, okay, half the people have, cardiovascular problems and half don't, even though they have high cholesterol. And it's really not a direct indicator, whereas homocysteine is a direct indicator. And yet, mind blow, take B6. Wow, easy fix, right?
Right. I'm glad that you said B6 because that's almost always my first go-to with that too. To help facilitate the conversion into glutathione is what I'm thinking right away, but also to
Yeah.
facilitate methylation, right? You need tons of B6 for that.
Yes, totally. So low stomach acid, again, very B1 dependent, zinc dependent. Depression, because we've got the slow processing. So, we get the sluggish cognition and depression that would go along with it. And then these half moons in the nails, another physical indication, like the red dots for homocysteine. These half moons often indicate that the thyroid is sluggish.
So
So
talk more
taking,
about the moon, that there's too much moon or there's not enough moon.
yeah, and I've gone back and forth with it. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, who was it? I think it was Wally Schmidt that first pointed it out to me. But yeah, so the presence of the half moons is supposed to be an indication that the thyroid is under functioning. So we're just looking, and then lines, vertical lines, it is not in this nail, but it typically is
Right.
an iodine deficiency. So those are
Okay.
other thyroid considerations that just simply looking at the nails could tell us.
So vertical lines specifically would be more of an iodine deficiency in that case,
Yes. Mhm.
or an
Yeah.
overexposure to halogens, right? So that's which would
Like
be
fluoride.
yeah, yeah.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
good
Yeah,
to
so we
know.
got those again, if we can figure something out just by looking at a person's into their eye, into their fingernail,
Yep.
see, it's a lot faster than waiting for a lab or giving up blood to do it.
Right.
So
Right.
EFAs, essential fatty acids, are the building blocks for all the thyroid hormones. So easy fix, right? Just eat more fish. You take a good omega-3, which, we've got a lot of options there. Trace minerals, again, has a little bit of healthy iodine, and minerals help alkalize the system as a whole. Pituitary, or especially E-manganese, is helps the pituitary, which we, going back here,
Yep.
that's, helps drive this pathway, helps to feed the pituitary to create the TSH and tell the thyroid what to do. In other words, feed the boss.
Right.
So we've got all these symptoms and easy fixes ultimately, but well, and then let's talk about some of the physical manifestations. The teres minor, one of the rotator cuff muscle, I was going to call it the third most common problem, but yeah, each of the rotator cuff muscles has a different organ, whether it's the heart, the brain, or in this case, the thyroid.
Can you
There's
explain to somebody who is a layperson out there how they would know if their teres minor is weak or if they're having a problem with it? What movement would they be trying to do that might potentially give them an idea?
Thank you. Yeah, so the teres minor is moves the arm externally. So if your elbow's by your side and you're trying to push your elbow out, there's some exercises for that. The teres minor is the muscle that would do that. There's four rotator cuff muscles. That's one of those little muscles that helps the shoulder move smooth and appropriate. So when the thyroid's not functioning well, then that muscle will get weak and compromised. So it's called the teres minor. Anyway, it's in the back of the shoulder, a very small muscle that moves the arm externally or outward. So then the other muscle that I kind of stumbled across was the scalenes, the little muscles in the front of the neck here.
Mm.
They tend to get weak when the thyroid's not functioning well. Clinicians, the left side is going to be weak more typically with reverse T3 problems. Most of what we're talking today is hypothyroid, so that's going to be the right anterior scalene muscles. And
Mm.
so when those are weak, that sets up that straight cervical spine. So if somebody's taking an X-ray, or chiropractor's taking an X-ray and they say, "Oh, you've been in a whiplash injury," often it's actually a thyroid problem that sets that up, sets that straight neck sort of look. And then we have on one of the other podcasts, we talked about the anterior head carriage where the head chin forward tends to indicate neurodegeneration. That's another concern. And that's going to potentially go along with this thyroid problem. So spinal, if you're a chiropractor or if you are a chiropractor and recurringly having to adjust C4, then oops, there's a thyroid problem. It's thyroid that's causing C4 to go out. Or if you're a patient listening to this and your chiropractor, ask your chiropractor. If you're seeing a chiropractor on a regular basis, find out what vertebra they're adjusting. If they're adjusting the same C4 every time you go in, that is another why is C4 going out all the time? Keep asking those questions. Prompt your chiropractor to learn and dig a little deeper. I was taught in chiro school that we keep adjusting 3 times a week until it holds. And that's how the process works. I wasn't satisfied with that. I kept digging. I want to know why each vertebra goes out in the first place. That kind of spawned this whole Vrzal technique, if you will. So again, back to the symptoms, we got sluggish metabolism, hair loss, again, because thyroid, well, not again, we haven't talked about it yet, folic acid metabolism, or, metabolizing folic acid to folate. A lot of that is very thyroid dependent. That's part of the T4 to T3 conversion concern. So when the thyroid's not working, we have weight gain, we have suboccipital headaches, that purple headache that we had on the last slide. And incidentally, as I was putting this together again back in the day, I learned that the T4 to T3 conversion activates enzymes. Enzymes are very mineral dependent, so we think iodine and that sort of stuff. But it's the deficiency of enzymes ultimately that causes the neck extensors, the muscles in the back of the head, to get weak, and that's what sets up that tension headache. So ultimately, it's this thyroid-induced low enzyme pattern that causes that suboccipital, what everybody else calls tension headaches.
Mm.
Then if the thyroid's going a little bananas, then we end up, with tachycardia via the vagus nerve, heavy menstruation. Girl stuff is very, very dependent. The irregular cycles and heavy cycles, that's all hypothyroid. Fertility concerns. Underfunctioning thyroid is one of the more, so to get pregnant, the girl needs a healthy thyroid. To maintain pregnancy, she needs healthy adrenals. So keep there. And I learned this the hard way when we were struggling for our second child. Our midwife identified that my wife's TSH was just below the unfortunately low norm, and so she gave her a prescription for Synthroid at the time. I'm like, oh no, 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 no. Put her on supplements. I don't think we had thyroid complex was not available yet, but I put her on some, Cataplex B and some vitamins to facilitate her thyroid, and her numbers were back into the healthy range, not even just the low end of norm, but the healthy range within 2 weeks. And so the midwife started sending all her fertility patients to me.
Nice, nice.
Great little synergy there. And
Excellent.
That's a lot of where I kind of learned some of this. And so my middle daughter's 23 now, so that was 24 years ago.
Let's focus a little bit. I don't mean to cut you off there, but on the hair loss, because that's one thing that a lot of people are interested in. In fact, the lady I told you about earlier who came in with the migraines, actually, one of her top complaints was hair loss, more than the migraines, right? Because the migraines were managed by the medication. But you put folic acid metabolism on there. Now, interestingly, that the medication she's taking is depleting her folate, right?
Yep.
So potentially that's what's driving her hair loss. Can you talk a little bit more about that combination, the folic acid metabolism and hair loss specifically?
Yeah, so that T4 conversion activates folate, which drives the methylation pathway. So laying down new cells and so on, and regenerating healthy cells. Yeah, and ultimately what we're going to talk about is activating the tumor suppressor genes. That's kind of where we're going today. But folate is the main player for hair roots, making new hair where it's actually falling out with that deficiency of folate. So ultimately, it usually circles back to thyroid as we're talking about. So that's the big old mechanism there, and then that also gets activated with the enzymes. So
Wow.
that's how it goes
That's not
in.
something that's talked about much with hair loss. Most people don't talk about the folate piece when it comes to that. I mean, are you hearing people talk about that? I'm not.
I was going to say, thank you for reminding me to, stay on board with that because that's so elementary to me. I've
Yeah.
seen it for so many years. It's like, duh, I forget that a lot of the population isn't
Well, and where are they getting folate
psychotic
from in their diet, right? They're not eating green leafy vegetables.
veggies,
They're
right?
not,
And
they're
then it
not
just
eating
gets
beans and
and
asparagus,
it gets
right?
processed out of the grains, right? And then they spray in synthetic sources to try to compensate. People needed this B1 and they needed this folic acid. Here, let's put it back in, spray it back onto the wheat right before they make bread.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like crazy psychotic world that we live in. So the chart. So if you're a muscle tester or into diagnosing this sort of stuff, the right side of the thyroid is going to be a hypothyroid, and the scalene muscle in there is going to get weak when the thyroid is dysfunctioning. The left side will be again more typically reverse T3, causes the left side of the thyroid to be compromised. Then we've got that third eye muscle testing point right around the polarity point that is going to be related to the pituitary, which regulates all this. So just for those, and I know a lot of people on here are muscle testers or doctors, so that's a good, convenient way to do it. And again, just to belabor the point, the high cholesterol, one of the common triggers for high cholesterol is a underfunctioning thyroid.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to get into as I was digging into this many years ago, in whatever I just said, 2014, as I was digging into the material about thyroid, uh, researchers kept quoting this study about this 200% increase in risk of breast cancer with people on levothyroxine and Synthroid. And so, I'm like, whoa, 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 what's the mechanism? This is a big deal, right? And
Hmm.
so started looking into it. I dug into the research, went to, the college archives of where this study was, and apparently probably Mr. Synthroid got the paper redacted, so I couldn't, find the exact paper. I got a lot of quotes from it that other researchers had used. But so then my mind went to, well, what's the mechanism? So as I started digging into this, realized that again, the activation T4 to T3 facilitates methylation. It drives that methylation pathway. And so I started kind of testing this out to determine what's going on here. And then I learned, that methylation activates that tumor suppressor gene. So if we're not methylating properly, then we're not staying ahead of those abnormal cells that we're always forming. Believe it or not, we're making cancer cells every day. And so the liver needs to stay ahead of that process when it gets behind the eight ball and methylation doesn't, activate that tumor suppressor gene, incidentally, then we get behind the eight ball and we have problems. So Catherine at the time was 65 and on thyroid for many years. She had one of the most gnarly, stressful situations I'd ever had. We were talking offline about some of the stuff you were just recently helping somebody through. I mean, this gal's husband was a retired pastor, and the sky fell, poop hit the fan, and so his retirement was compromised, and the money, because it was all through the church, and the allegations against her husband, who was unfortunately in jail.
Oh
I mean,
man.
and then those allegations were family members, so she had no social
Wow.
network to vent to, and lost her, social network, if you will, and, financially challenged. And again, just all that to say, stress was beyond stress, and stress, cortisol is another thing that inhibits methylation. Cortisol inhibits methylation, much like toxic metals, much like hypothyroid. So she had this, perfect storm of compromise on her methylation pathway. And so, incidentally, her breast cancer, she came to me with breast cancer. Tumor markers were in the 3000s, and they should have been in the teens. It was craziness. So I
Wow.
went through the evaluation process with her and said, "Oh, your synthroid is compromising methylation. This is the mechanism. This is what we're after. Put her on some supplements. Eventually, she did not had her off of the Synthroid. And it was an amazing praise report and testimony to what we were seeing. We got her off of those and got her on nutrition for her thyroid, and her tumor markers came down to half of normal. I mean, it
Wow.
went from the 3,000s to less than half of normal. And she was, feeling good and doing well. And I was like, ooh, this is proof positive. This is amazing stuff. About 3 months into the protocol, her, stress was still gnarly as ever, and her energy dipped. So she panicked, and I need my Synthroid, and went back on her
Mm.
Synthroid. And boom, her markers went back up directly into, tied to the Synthroid intake. Numbers went back into the 2,500, 3,000 range. And and it was ugly. So, and then we again, hey, Catherine, chill out, and got her back down. The numbers went back down. So we did this crazy yo-yo. And unfortunately, again, with all the stress and everything else, eventually, unfortunately, cancer won this battle. But I mean, it just kind of begs the question that, again, it's got a kind of a doom and gloom ending, but let's learn from Catherine's life, or the sacrifice ultimately that these are the consequences of inactivity, of not, doing this properly. Again, so
Well,
let's
and
learn from.
also, Dr. V, having a community of people that reinforce the truth about what she actually needed to do versus a community of people that are telling her you just need to take more Synthroid, right? You just need to take it. Because there is that noise out there, right? Well, your energy's low just because you're thyroid. And people are being told that. And so this is why it's really important that we continuously have these conversations, because people need to know that the story doesn't end there, even though they're
Yeah.
being told by people with authority that it does.
Hmm.
That's it. That's the end of the conversation. It is not. It's very much the beginning of the conversation. That's a very sad ending,
Hmm.
because it's very hard for someone to be pulled in these two directions to know what truly is the truth. And that's why we're doing the truth or trend about this,
Right.
where
Hmm.
it's very
Hmm.
trendy for everybody to just take a thyroid medication. And sure, you may get a short-term boost in energy and you may feel a little better, and your labs may fix after a few months, specifically just your TSH may fix,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
not the
Right.
rest of it. Can you share a
Right.
little bit about the protocol? Somebody watching this or listening to this may say, okay, if it increases the demand for methylation beyond the body's capacity, very good way of saying that,
Mhm.
would this be a case for someone to take a methylated B, right? I'm sure that
Absolutely.
people are thinking that. Okay.
For sure. Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was feeding the thyroid. So now, one of the first simple supplements I do would be a thyroid complex, right? It has a little ashwagandha in there, has the bladder-act, a couple of key players. Ashwagandha minimizes the potential for reverse T3. I think I've talked, anyway, it comes up periodically on our podcast. So anyway, thyroid complex, good consideration. If it's an autoimmune attack against the thyroid, then thyrotrophin PMG. That's a different mechanism. Another podcast. It
Yeah.
will be another podcast. The typical mechanism for autoimmune thyroid concerns is going to be whole wheat. The protein structure of the whole wheat is identical to the thyroid. That gets through leaky gut, and it's going to launch and trigger an autoimmune attack against the thyroid. So thyrotrophin when there's an autoimmune attack, pituitary when it's specifically TSH, E manganese, the anterior pituitary, is the primary player. When the anterior pituitary is compromised, often that will be that cyclops type headache, the central third eye type of a headache. That's a slam dunk E manganese indicator there.
Hmm.
So then, yes, thyroid.
But,
We've got iodine
but
considerations. Go ahead.
sure. And selenium before you give iodine. But
Yeah,
specifically
yeah.
back to the methylation piece, to support the
Oh
body's
yeah.
increased need for methylation. One of the
Hmm.
things I'm thinking about is beta food or AF beta food, because they have a methyl donor in them, right? Which will help take some of the burden off of the body, creating all the methyl donors to some degree,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
Also, when I think of methylation, I think of methionine needing to get converted to SAMe, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
often think that there's a low protein intake for a lot of these people, because they also need the tyrosine to make T4, and that could be one of the reasons that they're missing out or needing more T4
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
synthetically. So protofood or an amino acid protocol is something I would consider. And
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
usually magnesium is going to be low in these individuals, because you need that magnesium for that conversion of the methionine into SAMe. So just a
Hmm.
couple of things to add to that checklist if they're on a thyroid
Yeah,
medication, because it
right.
is increasing the demand beyond the capacity of the body, as you said there, which is really beautifully said. So
Well, 100%. And that's the symphony. I just wanted to bring this back to you know, belabor what you're saying. So beta food is an amazing B vitamin methyl donor, right?
right.
And so if they're deficient, if they need that, then they're typically going to have a right-sided headache too. So that's
Mm.
the fun for me, if you will. That's the game as a clinician to put
Mhm.
all this together. Like, oh, you have right-sided headache, you have suboccipital headache. I'm going straight to beta food. It's like pff, done, you
Nice.
know. And
Nice.
then, you know, it's like I'm confident that the ball's going over the fence, grand slam, you know.
Yeah, right.
When we have those you know, that's why we teach this way. That's why this podcast is structured the way it is, to take those little tidbits and put them all together, and then that boosts our confidence. And we know, you know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, we're changing the life of that person in a really profound way and heading off some of this ugliness that could potentially take place. So you talked about the methyl donors of AF beta food and beta food. We talked about methionine, getting the protein in there, iodine, make sure you get the right iodine source. And yes, take selenium to convert it to facilitate the sulfation path, excuse me. Again, methylated glucuronidation, the conversion of T4 to T3. Selenium helps get toxic metals out. Yeah, so it's another profound. And so nutritionally, if you're a standard process user, in this case, Cataplex E is the good source of selenium. Food wise, I suggest walnuts. Um, what is what are the big nuts that people that are said to
Brazil
be the
nuts.
highest? Brazil nuts. Uh, Technically, they're an avoid from a blood type perspective, so I typically lean in more towards walnuts because they're highly beneficial
And
from a
walnuts are a
blood.
good source of selenium as well.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. If they're
So,
raw, organic, and sprouted, just to make sure. Yeah.
exactly. So that's right. You were starting to, weren't you starting to sell those at one point for a little while there?
I did. I had a great, and then my source was, it was difficult to source it. I had the healthy handfuls. That was another one of my crazy inventions. Yeah.
You keep it
But
going.
now I do keep, raw organic sprouted walnuts in my office, and I do eat a half of a handful almost every day that I'm in clinic. That's just a habit that I've created with some organic blueberries for, because you want to get the whole food thing in there from that reason.
How
Yeah.
young and
So
vibrant you are, huh?
yay, I'm doing what I can. I'm doing what I can. Trying to make it easy, right, to be able to do these things. And I think that's the point that you're making is you got to find them in foods. You got to create habits so that we're not just chasing all of these over and over and over again.
Right, and put the picture together. You know, you got multiple symptoms or multiple headaches. There's a common thread for both of them.
Right.
I think that was one of the questions that came up on our podcast, right? Somebody was asking, you know, if I have, multiple, if I have, right side headache and a left side headache and whole head, where do we start? And ultimately, for me, it's look for the common thread between all three.
Right.
So we
Right.
have a right side headache, suboccipital headache. We're going right to a methyl donor like beta food, like eating more beets and so on.
Yeah. Right. Right. And I want to stop really quick because this medication thing is a big deal. A lot of people on this medication. And I want to encourage anybody who's listening to know that I personally, and I'm sure you've had the same case, many people who've been on this medication for years and years and years, no longer needing this medication. It is possible
Mm-hmm,
to get to the
mm-hmm,
point. I have a lady in her 80s who is on this for at least 20 years, and she has not needed it for 5 years now, right? Because we've got
mm-hmm,
the nutrients moving in her body, even in her 80s, right? I had
mm-hmm,
a case of a lady not too long ago who had a thyroidectomy a decade ago and was
mm-hmm,
told she has to be on this medication for life. And she has for the last several months, and she's had her labs rechecked and everything's perfect
mm-hmm,
without, and not just TSH, all of her thyroid labs are perfect without
mm-hmm.
using this medication. So even with a thyroidectomy, getting
Yep.
the nutrition right, your body can get back to balance on all these things. So if anybody tells you that you have to be on a medication for life, they've just reached the end of their knowledge about it, and they need to listen to our podcast a little bit.
All right. It's not in this. Okay. So I'm ending Tuesday on the same testimony. I was
Okay.
gonna like you're spoiling the finale here, but but yeah. So tomorrow night the Headache Summit podcast, one of the closing testimonies is a written testimony from a patient that had a thyroidectomy 25 years prior and had her off all her medications. Her labs were normalized. She felt better than ever, without medication, being on a couple of supplements. And so that's always the mic drop moment, as I say, she's off her medication. She's feeling great. Her labs are normalized. And then I say, 25 years ago, her thyroid was removed. Mic drop. How's that possible?
Well, and it's
So
yeah,
it's
it's possible. And it's not just you and I, right? And it's not just those two
Mhm.
people. This is something that is
Right.
totally doable. All right,
Yeah,
let's
most people are told that once, you need to be on this for the rest of your lives because unfortunately, most clinicians are not treating the reason that the thyroid was out of balance in the first place.
exactly.
They're treating the labs, hey, this puts your TSH better, so then you keep your hair and blah blah blah.
Yep.
Upside risks are more challenging. So to dig again a little deeper into the whole medication aspect, I see this consequence far less with Armor, some of the pork thyroids and so on, just to help give people a peace of mind if, they are on that or have been on it. Some of the other medications have a little less of a hypomethylation consequence. So Synthroid and levothyroxine, these T4, these are the meds that are most commonly causing this consequence that we're talking about today. Again, there's better ways even beyond those, but if you're going to do a medication, that's a little less toxic. And Dustin called me out for making this too complicated.
Not for everybody, but we'll try to make this simplified for the people watching anyway.
Right, right. So I mean, I created this chart, and I was all excited because and especially thyroid. I don't know what it is, but I like to geek out on the thyroid because it's so powerful. I mean, I look at it like the lion. It's the master control. It's kind of the silent leader of the jungle, if you will. So chiropractically, C4 is going to be kind of the circuit breaker, if you will, for the thyroid. L5 more typically is going to be the adrenal consequence of that. And then autoimmune thyroid will set up a L5 disc, incidentally, because both glute max muscles are going to turn off when the thyroid is being attacked from an autoimmune perspective. So ultimately, addressing the thyroid dysfunction can improve energy, muscle function, mental clarity, and long-term health. Long-term health is what we're talking about today. So we want to take care of the thyroid and look at, the muscles. These are here because this is going to give us an indication, hopefully an early indication that the thyroid is dysfunctional. So the scalenes we just talked about, in the front of the neck and the cervical tension that's going to go along with that when the thyroid is under functioning. Maybe that's part of the swallowing mechanism that is often blamed on the enlargement of the thyroid.
Makes
We have
sense.
that to consider, right?
Yeah.
So untreated hypothyroid can affect muscles, joints, nerves, metabolism, and mental function, impacting your quality of life. That's why it's so fun for me or us as clinicians to nail this thing and really rock and change somebody's world, especially now, what we're hoping to make a point of today, understanding the potential consequences, the crystal ball of what could have happened if we didn't intervene in this way.
Let me just ask you something since we're looking at this, the glute max muscle situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people aren't using their glutes because they're sitting too much, right? And they're not doing activities that are engaging the glutes. And I've definitely seen that to be an issue. Is there an argument to say that potentially that can also contribute to a weakness in the thyroid just because you have a weakness in the glutes, or is it more the other way around?
Movement is very good for the thyroid in general, right? Get the body, get the metabolism, get the blood flowing. And so sitting, to flip your conversation around, sitting puts about 2,500 pounds of pressure on that L5 disc. If the glutes are neurologically inhibited, then you've got even more. Then that 2,500 pounds becomes even exponential from there. And so that's the mechanism ultimately that sets up a blown disc, if you will. So we've got that mechanism. So yes, if you're at your desk, get up, set alarm on your computer or your phone or something to just stand up, move your legs a couple of times, at least an hour.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're going to miss productivity, but you're going to be more productive in the time that you are sitting when you get up and move periodically. So
maybe
take
just
a walk at your break.
Just to engage those glutes.
Air squats are right.
Yeah.
Stretch the hamstrings, anything is better than sitting there for 8 hours straight.
Right.
So we've got that going on. We've got all the symptoms of dry skin, the weight gain, the thinning hair is usually where the girls, start reaching out. Oh, my thyroid.
Yep.
And then the slow mental processing. That's a big deal. I mean, when the thyroid's really off,
Yeah.
it is very, very obvious when they just can't come up with the kids' names. They can't quite get those words out. It feels like their computer is dilapidated. They're still running DOS and and a dial-up network, you know.
Yeah. Sometimes I hear that in my own head. Yeah, the dial-up sometimes.
It's all there. So we've got the fatigue, the the cold intolerance, right? Because of thyroid hypothalamus connection, then sluggish bowels, again, overall metabolism, low mood, muscle weakness, low energy. These are all signs that we want to head them off. Again, because these are signs that the thyroid's not working well, which ultimately directly relates to big name biochemical imbalances.
Yeah.
So fun chart. Hopefully that simplified it a little bit. I mean, it's developed to help inspire people who are willing to learn from what their body's trying to tell them. So the connection between underfunctioning thyroid and underfunctioning liver detoxification. Again, I guess we should have defined a little bit about methylation is a phase 2 detoxification pathway. Some of the big inhibitors of it are, cortisol, toxic metals, underfunctioning thyroid. So methylation activates a tumor suppressor gene. So when we're not methylating properly, the messenger RNA and the RNA strands become compromised. So we make cells that are not healthy as they should be. So when we regenerate, being cancerous. So we've got that tumor suppressor gene regulation that is ultimately what we're talking about here. We want to repair DNA so that we can make healthy cells and not keep making compromised cells that is what cancer is, right?
Right.
So healthy cells receive clear instructions on when to grow, repair, and stop dividing when this pathway is working properly. That's the ideal, right?
Yes.
Did you have something else you wanted to add on that?
No, it's beautiful. No, continue on.
So we got step one, reduce T4 to T3 conversion when the thyroid's not functioning properly. So then we have slower metabolism, which means less ATP production, P, phosphorus, one of Dustin's favorite nutrients
Mhm.
to make the energy. Then we've got impaired methylation cycle, which is folate, right? B12, B6, choline, TMG with betaine, and then methionine. So incidentally, just about every one of these nutrients is made by gut bacteria, incidentally,
Mm.
which so that's a new thing in the literatures. B12, B6, all literally. When I was putting one of the other seminars together, and we talked about this a little bit. We showed this slide on the colon podcast we did a couple weeks ago, where each of these lactobacillus organisms make B12. So vegetarians, there's hope for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So just
We're actually going to
again,
talk about that in a future podcast coming up because I have a
next
really
week,
cool new
right?
test to help people understand their microbiome. But
Yeah, and so we need that to keep that information going. So each of the B vitamins are made by different gut microbiome. So again, the symphony, right? Healthy
yeah,
gut. Is the gut compromised because the thyroid's not functioning?
right.
We've got all that to consider. So take the B12, take the B6 to break the cycle, get things functioning, like feed the good gut bacteria. And as Dustin mentioned earlier, that low SAMe, which is primary methyl donor for DNA methylation. So we want to make healthy cells, ultimately is what we're talking about, when this runs properly. So the genes should remain silenced, if you will. They become more active, and then we have trouble. Cellular signaling becomes less regulated. So again, DNA is the rebuilding block. That's the blueprint, if you will, for healthy cells. When the DNA is compromised, then they manufacture unhealthy, inappropriate cells. And so
Right.
that's this uncontrolled cell proliferation that takes place when this mechanism is not functioning properly. So we have increased oxidative stress. That means phase one, and that's a more malignant type of a cancer scenario. Whereas when it's just methylation, then that's more of a benign type of a cancer. If there was good news in a cancer arena, that would be it. So we've got impaired DNA repair. We've got increased inflammation, altered gene expression, ultimately is what we're talking about here, reduced cellular differentiation, and increased cellular proliferation. So we have basically the stage is set for cancer when the thyroid is under functioning over the long haul because of its effect on this methylation and the activation of folate, which is preventative for us.
And you're saying,
So
well, we're mentioning here that just taking a thyroid medication isn't going to make up for all of this, right?
yes, point taken. Yes. And in fact, those medications are one of the main inhibitors of this normally healthy pathway. So we like this clinical note. Current evidence supports an association between thyroid dysfunction, altered methylation patterns, and changes in cellular regulation. And then we've got to get that little medical, however, hypothyroid alone is not considered. There's our regulatory.
Right. Well, hypothyroidism is not the direct cause of it, right?
Right, right,
The hypothyroidism is a secondary cause of what's really going on upstream. So yes.
right. So support the thyroid. Uh, so some of the inhibitors of methylation. So that's we're talking about. I talked about Catherine's story where
Yeah.
she had the stress, she had some of the toxic metals, especially after she got some so-called therapy for her cancer. And then she'd been on long-term thyroid levothyroxine. So we want to detox. Methylation detoxifies hormones and chemicals, especially toxic metals. And then it's a biggie for neurotransmitters like dopamine, right? The one of the primary happiness neurotransmitter of memory and storage. We've got it regulates gene expression, which we're leaning into today, and then cellular repair again, where we're really trying to lean at this point. So we've got the role of the thyroid hormone. It helps us be human, ultimately. Stokes metabolism.
Yep. Yep.
It modulates enzyme activity, and that's the mechanism for the suboccipital headaches. Wow. That's part of how it regulates metabolism is by upregulating, downregulating enzyme production. So deficiency of the enzymes is what causes, again, the neck extensor, the back of the neck muscles, they get weak, ultimately causing a headache. And so those are, unfortunately, these medications compromise this proper conversion, setting the stage for the big ugly, an increased metabolic demand, depletes the methylation pathways. Again, our B12, our SAMe, folate, and B6 ultimately as well. And then that one carbon pathway. So MTHFR is all the buzz, in the genetic world. So the MTHFR gene defect, is that people with that defect, is that because of long-term or their parents were taking Synthroid? There's
Right.
a mind warp for you. Love to figure out how to, study that somehow.
Yeah.
So we've got impaired methylation, which sets the stage for cancers, and then the functional consequences of symptoms and conditions that we've talked about, with all the mental fog and weight gain, hair loss, and so on. So signs we've discussed quite a bit, adding into that the histamine intolerance and poor detoxification, hormonal imbalances. So these are all signs potentially that the thyroid and the methylation isn't working properly. And then again, stress and B vitamin deficiencies, which often happens from gut imbalance or poor gut biota, low protein. And then hey, what do we do about it? Take your folate, take your whole food folate, take your
Mhm.
folic acid B12. I don't have a clinical pearl for when to use which one over the other. I'm at this point still muscle testing to see which one the patient responds to best. Both are fantastic folate products. Do you have
So you actually finding some people testing for folic acid B12 over whole food folate at this point?
periodically?
Periodically,
Yes.
very interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that recently, so I can't really speak to that personally. I was
Yeah.
leaning towards a whole food folate as much as possible, but no, I'm gonna
Right.
take a closer look at that and double check against the folic acid B12 too.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, I test to see which one works best for that person. Again, yeah. at some point, I'm sure God will give me a vision of, which one,
Yeah,
when to use which one clinically.
yep,
I know back in the day when this whole MTHFR thing was super popular 15 years ago or whatever that was, I'm like, oh, folic acid B12, that says folic acid. It's not going to be good for people. But incidentally, the what am I trying to say? The paradigm crashes when you look at the fact that if MTHFR was the problem that they say and the folic acid so-called problem, then people would be getting sick from eating vegetables.
right, right,
So, what we learned was as a vegetable source, as a, God intended a whole food source of folate that facilitates this pathway, whereas these synthetic, like we talked about a couple of podcasts ago on the multivitamins and so on, this is part of where they fall short. So the MTHFR people really need to be careful about taking folic acid supplements, the cheap
right,
forms
right,
of
right,
folic acid that is going to stress this methylation pathway. Incidentally, as we're discussing today, potentially opening the door for cancer. Wouldn't that be a
right.
mind warp? Taking one a day actually set the stage for cancer. There's another, anyway.
Let me read your takeaways at the bottom, though, because these are important. So the takeaway is levothyroxine Synthroid can be life-changing medications, but they also inhibit methylation by increasing metabolic demand and depleting methyl groups. Very important thing that we need to understand. We talked about depletion of other nutrients with other medications, and that methylation piece is really important to understand. If somebody has been on a thyroid medication or is on a thyroid medication, this is something that they should be aware of. And I like your little caution on there. Never adjust thyroid medication without professional medical guidance, right?
Gotta keep the cover in there, huh?
That's right. That's right.
So the potential long-term consequences, we've got cardiovascular problems of, high cholesterol, atherosclerosis. Really, the bigger risk there is poor methylation and so methylation setting up high homocysteine. We've got which also parallels the neurologic consequences, cognitive impairment, myxedema. So swelling and all of that, depression, minor consequence, but very real, very profound. And then we've got
And I
the
want to remind
metabolic.
everybody what we're talking about here is the consequences of thyroid dysfunction that's only been treated with thyroid medication, right?
Thank
Because
you.
these are all the other things that could potentially be that are still being created, even though you're taking a thyroid medication. Please continue. Yeah.
hmm Yeah. So look at the bigger picture. Look at why the thyroid's not functioning. Ultimately, is what we're trying to say here, right?
Yeah. Right.
Metabolic risks are for sure there. Then the reproductive risks. One of the primary causes of challenges getting pregnant is a thyroid,
Mm-hmm.
hypothyroid, or medications potentially. So we've got, and then low libido because of all deficiency of hormones in general. Goiter problems, meaning a enlargement, swelling of the thyroid, nodules potentially, and then rare thyroid conditions as well. So, I mean, there's big name thyroid storm is a hyperthyroid when it really goes bananas. But then thyroid cancers, often I see reverse T3 as one of the primary triggers, heightened reverse T3, which means chronic stress, ultimately. So learn, and again, these things, much like the whole headache advantage, we're going to talk about that and we're going to close with that, but take advantage of what your body's trying to tell with all these things. So thyroid consequences, we've covered pretty much all of this. This is another chart. We'll include those in the show notes. A couple of these infographics for you. To those of us that like to geek out on this, you can
Pause the video and look at it for a while.
yeah, or upload the chart that some of these charts that we've made.
Right.
So severe hypothyroid, can't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Mortality rate 30 to 60%. When that's kind of
Wow.
getting up there, isn't it?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we've got some big risks here in early diagnosis, learning from what your body's trying to tell you. I mean, it's not just the neck pain, right? Oops, maybe it's your thyroid trying to get your attention, the low back pain, thyroid trying to get your attention. If it progresses to the suboccipital headaches, that's really your body. That's a progressive, life-threatening, potentially life-threatening concern. So we want to make changes here and learn from it. We don't want thyroid cancers. We don't want cancers anywhere that ultimately could manifest from this.
Wow.
So here's some of the inhibitors. We've talked about fluoride is a halide that competes for iodine and it's going to cause thyroid problems. Fluoride is in most of our municipal waters, right? And toothpaste and a
Yeah.
lot of dental products. So we get some of the chlorine swimming in the pools and so on. And bromide is preservative kind of problems here. Heavy metals, especially mercury, used to be in a lot of amalgam fillings. So if you still have those, you want to look at ways to get those out. Fish mercury is more prone to hang out in the large intestine, less likely to affect the thyroid. And then we've got all the pesticides. We talked about glyphosate, often with right-sided headaches. So what do we do about it, right? Consider things like, as we've talked about, iodine. Test it. Those of you that are muscle testers, test to see which iodine is going to be the best because and it's not always. There are some iodines that are less prone to facilitate or stimulate autoimmune attacks against the thyroid, and some that are, and it depends, it's somewhat patient specific. Again, kind of like I was talking about with the folate, um, test to see make sure that the iodine you give them is not one that's going to upregulate the thyroid and upregulate the autoimmune attack against it. Selenium, eat your walnuts, whole, raw sprouted walnuts, great source of selenium or cataplex E. All our great zinc sources. Zinc shows up in so many ways, so many places. It's a very common mineral deficiency. And iron, we didn't get into that too much today, but anemia, that's part of why metabolism, why people are sluggish with anemia is because it downregulates the thyroid as well. So we've got the oxygen carrying and then the hypothyroid that goes along with anemia. Vitamin D, get out, get a little sun. It's a beautiful thing.
At this point, I could see how somebody could be slightly overwhelmed, right? So this is why we want to bring this back, to zoom out and say, look, what we're trying to show you is that there's many, many levers you can pull to improve this, right? There's many things. It's not just, one thing is going to fix all of these things. So use this more as a checklist. Say, okay, I've looked at the iron. I ruled that out. I'm okay there. I've ruled out my vitamin D. I am getting enough sunlight. I have checked my vitamin D levels, but continue to use this as a guide so that you can have a checklist to know that once, if you've hit a wall, you can come back to this and say, okay, what was I missing? Right? I've tried all these things. What else have I not looked at? Have I not looked at the food and dietary factors enough? Right? Have I not ruled out the gluten or excess sugar or processed food piece or all of this? So this really kind of gives you a place to go back to if you have somebody who's hit that stalling point where they're not seeming to get the next result, because we need to look at all of these factors in those individuals. Not all at once. I wouldn't start with all of this, right? I would start with the most obvious things. But if you get to a point where you can't move forward or you seem stuck, come back to this and just have you ruled out every single one of these things when it comes to thyroid?
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I mean, kind of like this little box in the bottom center, the big picture, right? Thyroid dysfunction is rarely caused by a single factor. It's usually the result of multiple stressors interacting over time. Identifying and reacting to these, reducing, if you will, these inhibitors is a key to restoring optimal health. So, I mean, as you just beautifully said, maybe it means printing this chart out and okay, I've been taking zinc and I still have some of these symptoms. So what's the next step? Maybe we use this as a check the box, as you kind of ferret it out. Ultimately, any one of these could be the silver bullet for you, the keystone. And so this chart is going to be beautiful for that sort of an approach. And ultimately, we're throwing a lot of information at you, but hopefully, as we throw all this out, you're going to realize, oh, check, box X, Y, and Z. Then, okay, I know I likely have an iodine deficiency because of, I have, we should have talked about that. Lipomas often are an iodine deficiency. So, there goes another tangent. So selenium is so if you have lipomas, those fatty cysts on the body, consider selenium, go straight there. So pearls like that could be the one that, for, your spouse or your friend that has a thyroid problem, their trigger could very well be something completely different. Maybe they're swimming and they're in the chlorine all the time and you're eating wheat or you have a selenium deficiency. So use a chart like this, use the pearls that you're getting through this, headed through this Truth or Trend podcast to really get to what your body's trying to tell you is really ultimately, what we're all about. Is trying to help educate you to be your best ultimately.
So for those of you who are still hanging in there with us, I know this is one of the longest episodes we've done, but let's
Is it
break.
really?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh man, it
No, it's
is.
great. I always encourage people to pause it, and then take in what you can and take a breath, take a little walk, do some squats, come back. But let's finish this. Let's put, because the ultimately is where we're leading to is this, right? Again, back to the book, The Headache Advantage. Go for it.
Yeah, no, ultimately it's not, yes, the book is a source, a resource. It's ultimately it's about embracing the message,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, that's why the book was called The Headache Advantage, again, because the head is a priority for us. So, God has wired us so that if we have head pain, that's an alarm, that's a three alarm that, as opposed to, oops, I have a little ache in my finger or my, this or that. Any pain in the body is a message that there is dysfunction, the body needs help. So the advantage of pain, especially the headaches, is that it's our early warning sign. So take advantage of, do you have this purple suboccipital headache? That is an indication that your thyroid is not functioning properly. Now you know the potential long-term consequences of, if you don't take action with this, then this is where you want to look at thyroid. You could be flirting with cancers, with cardiovascular strokes and heart attacks if you take your medication. If you put your head under the sand, put your head under the pillow and ignore the signs, you're missing the potential to really change the outcome, the quality of your life.
Love it. Well done. Absolutely. What, anything last on this that we want to say? Is there another slide? Or you ready
You want to go for another 45 minutes? No. This is it.
Well,
That's what I
next
want to
week
do.
we will. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so next week we're going to get into some of the gut bacteria stuff, or some of the bacteria,
Yes.
healthy flora that feed some of the B vitamins that we've talked about today. So,
We've got
so
some
much to
really,
keep
we
the
got a really
conversation
cool.
going.
Go ahead. Sorry. Say that again.
No, I was just going to keep the conversation going, which we're going to do next week's Truth or Trend.
Next week we have a great, great new guest who has a new test that I have just finally been very excited to share with everybody. I can hardly wait to have her on so everybody can have access to another way of learning something very specific about your microbiome. So looking forward to that. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Thank you for hanging in there with us through all of this, because it's a lot. But the point is, you can use this as a resource to come back to it, right? Always come back to it. Listen to it again, because there's so much in there that we can do. And overall, I think the biggest takeaway from today is, just because you've been put on a thyroid medication, that is just the beginning of that conversation. It should not be the end of that conversation. And there's so much more we can learn about your long-term health, and really truly really serving you as a whole human, to be able to go back and go through this whole list of everything that we just went over, so that you can be as healthy as possible for as long as possible, and reduce those risks that we're talking about when you're ignoring all of those things. Any last words, Dr. V, before we let them go?
Love it. Keep the conversation going. Learn from what your body's trying to tell you.
Yes, and thanks for the comments, and thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.